Dear friends, good evening, and I'm extremely happy to welcome you to this 94th Leadership Conversation. I want to thank you all on behalf of ICFAI Group and ICFAI Online that you've been coming back again and again, week after week for the last 2 years. It's been extremely motivating for us to present some important thought leaders for this leadership conversation. And today, please join me in welcoming Mr. Viiveck Verma. Mr. Viiveck Verma, good evening, sir, and welcome to you.
Good evening. Good evening.
I am extremely happy that we are able to talk on an amazing topic today, that is a growth mindset. From failure to success, the power of a growth mindset. This is what Mr. Viiveck Verma is going to delve into. And before he delves into this topic, allow me to share my screen for a brief introduction. And then we'll hand it over back to the leader here, and you all can listen to him. Here is my screen being shared. As I mentioned, this is Leadership Conversations from Failure to Success, the current discussion, the power of a growth mindset. The introduction and the talk by the leader will consume about 25 to 30 minutes, and then we'll begin the Q&A. That will last for 30 to 40 minutes. And this is Mr. Viiveck Verma on picture. He's a distinguished essayist, author, and speaker. He helps many enterprises, both commercial as well as social enterprises, by promoting strategic thinking, developing their go-to-go market strategies, commercializing their innovations, improving their brands, people, operations, governance, and cadence. He's a revered mentor. He's a specialist in corporate strategy with over 3 decades of sectoral and cross-functional work experience. He has an experience of creating of more than 10 notable entrepreneurial corporate ventures. He's a brand builder. Building brands is Mr. Viiveck's forte, where he has demonstrated noteworthy accomplishments. All 3, the first one, TEDx Hyderabad, SAHE, and Upsurge Global, all these 3 exhibit this brand building talent of Mr. Viiveck Verma. He founded his own consulting business, Upsurge Global, and today holds a variety of responsibilities. More than 130 commercial startups and more than 10 social businesses have benefited from his investments, mentoring, and brand building efforts. He's a startup enthusiast and a business strategist beyond these 140 organizations. Mr. Viiveck uses his, beyond these 140 organizations, he uses his network to increase efficiency and assist ecosystem growth. His philosophy is that the value of a network transcends the value of net worth. It's interesting. His philosophy is that the value of a network transcends the value of net worth. He achieves this through regular engagement with incubators, educational institutions, industry associations, and enterprises in order to comprehend the human mind and also behavior. He wanted to apply it to his profession. He prepared himself with a huge number of variety of certifications, and some of them include Zenger Miller Leadership Trainer and Professional Certified Coach, that is PCC, and ICF, International Coaching Federation certifications. He believes firmly that all enterprises have an impact and that corporate structures apply both to for-profit organizations as well as not-for-profit organizations. He provides significant knowledge and expertise to this convergence of business and impact, where most of the growth lies. Being an internal optimist, he applies this attitude to everything that he undertakes. That's a very impressive work profile of, welcome once again, Mr. Viiveck Verma. Thank you for agreeing to speak here on our platform. I will also introduce my esteemed colleague, Professor Prasad. He is the Director of Academic Wing at ICFAI Group. He's currently the professor and course mentor for the online MBA program, which is becoming extremely popular these days. His teaching areas included strategy and entrepreneurship, and he brings with himself a rich experience of 3 decades, out of which he was a successful entrepreneur. He was a corporate leader, professional, as well as currently he is a renowned academic at ICFAI Group. He holds a BTech from IIT Bombay and the PGDM from prestigious IIM Kolkata. He published several articles, books, and papers in the conferences that were held in India and abroad. I wholeheartedly welcome Professor Prasad as well.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And it's time to stop sharing my screen. Now is the time. I once again welcome and request Mr. Viiveck Verma to start his session. We are all ears. Thank you very much. And I'm muting my mic.
Thank you. Thank you, Sudhakar, and thank you, Mr. Bhatia, Mr. Prasad, sorry, for kind of inviting me to talk on what I very passionately call one of my favorite topics. And I call it my favorite topics because I think I'm here today at the end of the lovely introduction that Sudhakar, all as a result of some early failures that I encountered. And let me begin by sharing my slides. Yeah, I hope all of you can see my slides.
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you. So I'm like I was saying, I'm here because I think I encountered failure very early in my life, and I think that's what I'm going to talk about today. That I think failure is such an important piece in our own life. So before we start the presentation, and I talk about some of the concepts revolving from failure to success and the power of a growth mindset, I just want to narrate what I meant when I said that, the failure has been something that I've encountered early in my life. I go back to my student days in the ninth grade when I was studying in Kendriya Vidyalaya in a city called Pune. I come from a family where my father was an army officer, so a typical middle class defense personnel son studying in the Kendriya Vidyalaya. For those of you who are aware, that's the school we all from a defense background go to. And come ninth grade, I was almost staring at being at the juncture of repeating the ninth grade, which essentially means failing in more than 4 subjects. Typically, in most schools, if you fail in 1 or 2 subjects, you're given what is called a supplementary exam, and you can give that and still qualify and then move to the next grade. And imagine that coming from a head of the department, professor of anatomy in the Armed Forces Medical College, defense officer son, the eldest in the family from my father's side, from my mother's side, staring at failing in the ninth grade, which means the whole generation is going to be following this route. And that's when the change for me happened. And I just went back and requested the school to say that I think I need to be given a second chance. And that's where I attribute a lot of my change in my life to happen. And I won't get into too many details given our time right now. But from that stage of almost failing in ninth, and by the way, I was allowed to give 4 supplementaries and I cleared the ninth. I got distinction in 10th. I got distinction in 12th. I went on to top Pune University in my BSc in a subject called geology, and I came 52nd ranked in the entire university across all subjects in roughly about 14 or 15,000 students who would have graduated that year. And that's where I think my journey from failure to success really began. And I'll talk a little bit about that and what lessons I learned coming out of that. But to start with, this whole concept of failure, and I think this is a cultural context here, that failure essentially is a lack of success in doing something. And that's what all of us, especially in an Indian context, have grown up with. And failure is attributed as such a bad thing that, that it kind of brings a lot of mindset, a lot of mental issues in our mind, that we don't want to do anything where we think we are likely to fail, where there is a possibility of a failure, because it is seen as a lack of success. And I think that's where the whole journey really begins, because failure, in my view, and we'll talk a little bit about, is not about something that you cannot do. It's not about the fact that it means that you are a failure. The difference between something that didn't work and you becoming a failure, there is a whole world between the two. But unfortunately, in our context, the two are equated. If you fail at something, it essentially means you are a failure. And that's really not true. And I think, if we look at, and Sudhakar mentioned towards the end of the introduction about the eternal optimist that I am. So for me, it's question of finding the silver lining in anything and everything that one does. And hence, when I look at failure itself, I look at it as an opportunity. And I looked at it as an opportunity when I go back to the ninth grade, when I go back to my education, and then in the professional world, and multiple times in my life, when something didn't work. And that's all it means to me, that something didn't work. From lack of success, I translate that to something that didn't work. It just meant that I have one more chance to try again. I need to go back and try again. And that's where I said cultural context. If you look at progressive countries or progressive areas in the world, the Silicon Valley, Israel, and a few other places, success is celebrated and so is failure. Somehow we don't do that enough. And I think that's where the difference lies. So if we understand that failure is just one attempt that didn't work, that means I have got another attempt and I need to go and try it again, take some learnings from there. And and if you're failing and you're learning from the failure, then I think it's a very good thing that you are doing. If you are failing and you're not learning for him, then there is a problem. uh, Failure also, or the fact that you couldn't succeed, means you need to do some more creative thinking. It also gives you an opportunity to kind of go back and look internally to say, what else can I do, what else could I do? And it also gives you, at least to me, it gives me a lot more excitement to do more things alive. And I keep saying this all the time, that problems or failures are what keeps best managers active. If there were no problems and there were no failures, then I think as managers we'll be jobless, because then I don't know what we will do. So part of what we do is to help people or help ourselves deal with failures, deal with something that didn't go right, or something that's a problem which we discovered now. And last but not the least, I think it means that you must change something in the way you're doing. What you did didn't work. And the choice available is, we keep doing the same thing, or we say, okay, what didn't work? Let's try and find that out. So my suggestion to all of you would be that if you do see failure somewhere, look at it as an opportunity rather than a end point by itself. There are multiple myths, and like I said, the contextual piece here comes into play from a society perspective, that failure is final. Failure is not final. Nothing in life is final, because life itself is continuing. Only death is final. Nothing else is final. So is failure. So it isn't final. It isn't the end of the road. Our attempt failed. You didn't fail, because you are still going to try. You will fail if you stop trying. So I think that is an important myth we need to break. Failure means you're not good enough. Absolutely not. Failure means something didn't work, whether it was in the environment, whether it was in your effort, whether it was in other areas that you need to look at. But it does not mean that you are not good enough. That could be part of the reason. And that also means there is an area of improvement. And it's not saying that it's final, that I'm not good enough. I know, and I'm sure each of you know, examples of people who've gone on to do some phenomenal things from there. Success is impossible once you've failed, which is kind of continuing the myth one, that it's final. If you've not been able to succeed, that's it. You can't go forward. It's a myth. Successful people never fail. And we'll talk about it later. Successful people probably are the ones who failed the most and learned from it the most. And that's how they went forward. You should be ashamed of failing. And that is the biggest problem that we have from a contextual perspective. There is nothing to be ashamed. Failure is a fantastic scar to carry, especially when you are in the spaces of innovation, entrepreneurship, new activities. It's like saying I'm a frontline army officer and I have a few wounds that I can show, because that tells you that I was at the battlefront and I battled at the front and I got wounded. So it's not a bad thing. There's nothing to be feeling ashamed of. And failure is not the opposite of success. Actually, failure is a part of success. If you haven't failed, then you can't succeed. And that's the critical piece of for us to understand from our mindset perspective, that we need to embrace failure, because failure is as much a part of success as success itself is. If I haven't failed, then I haven't learned. And this is where I say the cliche that you can't make a mistake twice, because the second time you make the mistake, it's not a mistake. It's a choice you have to make that mistake or not. If I'm walking and I don't notice a step and I kind of, fall down because I didn't notice the step, the first time it's a mistake. The second time when I walk there and I still choose to ignore that the last time there was a step which I missed and I need to be careful this time. Now that's not a mistake, I can say the second time. The second time I had a choice and I chose not to bother about it. When we look at a innovative future, and I think all of us today are looking at the fact that how do we contribute to the future? How do we look at innovation? How do we look at creativity? And these are not just buzzwords. I think these are very important from the whole contribution that we can make to making the world a better place. And in that, I think failure is a very, very important aspect that we need to keep in mind, because failure forces us to innovate even more. If we do something that doesn't work, it pushes all of us, it pushes the person who's not succeeded to innovate even more. It dares us to be more creative. It tells us that, okay, don't take a cookie cutter approach, don't take a historic approach, think of something different, something more creative. And it helps you to play the devil's advocate, because imagine that if that failure happens later in life, when you've taken the product, let's say, to a market, there's a large customer base you have. Now if the failure happens early, then the learning you get is phenomenal and the cost of that learning is so much lower. So it helps you play the devil's advocate, it helps you improve your product if you can. And that's where I say, if you fail early and if you fail fast, and I'm sure you've heard this cliche again, that failing fast is a very important thing, because then you can learn, pivot, and kind of change the things going from there. I think all of us know this gentleman. Many of us respect him with huge, huge respect. I mean, I certainly do. And he had this very, what I call a famous quote: when we tackle obstacles, we find hidden reserves of courage and resilience we did not know we had. And it is only when we are faced with failure do we realize that these resources were always there within. We only need to find them and move on with their in our lives. So this is what the power of a failure is, that it helps us to find those hidden reserves, hidden resources, hidden talent that each of us have. And each of us has phenomenal talent. Some of it may not show up in the first attempt, it will show up later, but we do have. And I very strongly resonate with this statement Mr. Abdul Kalam made many years ago. Now, if we've looked at this as a failure, and when something does not go right, I think the critical piece for us to do is to do some self-reflection and ask ourselves some tough questions. I'm a coach. I believe in the power of the fact that we need to ask a lot of questions, and we need to be honest with ourselves. There's one man or one woman or one face with whom we can't lie, and that face is the face in the mirror. That's the only face who will kind of tell us if we are attempting to give some excuses, show some laziness, or do any of that, which is usually the case in quite a few of the failed attempts. We also need to notice the behavioral patterns. Typically, our body and our senses already begin to tell us something that's not working or that's not right. So we need to start noticing that behavioral patterns in ourselves. We need to be able to articulate our core values. Quite often the conflict in the core values is what causes the failure. And let me take a minute here to say that, most of us who are working professionals will be working for a company which has a vision statement, which has some core values. Some of us who may be in schools or colleges may have a mission that the school has. But how many of us have our own personal vision statements and personal core values that we abide by? And if you do, then or less chances of failure become significantly better, because you are able to articulate what your vision is, what your core values are, and what's going to really drive you. And last you made, which didn't work, you need to learn from it and move on. This isn't fine. And keep of your reflection. Like I said, don't make the same mistake twice. So if you've learned something from this reflection, learn from that. Now, signs that you're afraid of failure. Fear is a very important piece which holds back. And that's where that journey from failure to success does not happen, because we get caught up in failure. Avoidance, powerlessness, anxiety, helplessness, feeling out of control, and indecisiveness means that you are getting afraid of failure. And you need to kind of shake yourself out of it and say, it's okay if I do fail. If something doesn't work, nothing in life is final. I can then still find a way to go forward. But if I get stuck in one of these emotions, then failure is almost guaranteed. And then your energy will get driven coming from there. So if you notice any of these signs, be aware that there is somewhere a fear of failure in your mind and you need to overcome that. And how do you overcome that? What do you look at doing is, look at no shame policy. There's no shaming in case of a failure. It's just an attempt which didn't work. That's about it. As long as we start looking at it like that, and imagine a society where all of us start looking at it like that. All we are telling to each other is that, okay, this didn't work. Okay, no issues. It didn't work. Let's figure out what went wrong and let's make it happen the next time. Instead of shaming, saying, oh, you failed, you are a failure, you've done this 5 times. And like I said, many of us have grown up in a society where that's how it is, that you make a mistake 2-3 times, different mistakes, but you make a mistake 2-3 times, you are labeled, you're good for nothing, you're useless. So no shame policy. Let's address the problem. Let's learn from our mistakes. Don't bottle it up. That's the most important piece in terms of overcoming the fear of failure. Even if it means it's to your colleagues, in sometimes to your boss, that look, this is where I'm getting stuck. And you're not going there to say, I can't do it. You're going there to say, I'm attempting to do it, but I'm getting stuck here. So don't bottle it up. Talk to people, because more often than not, you'll get your answers from there. We talked about the fears in the previous slide. So question your fears. If you're feeling anxious, you're feeling nervous, question that. Focus on what you can control. Your emotions, you can control. Your actions, you can control. How you react to what's happening in the world, you can control. So focus on that and leave what you can't control, because there is where the feelings or the emotions we talked about will be much higher. Also, everything in life is not black and white. So embrace the gray. There is going to be some amount of gray as we go forward. Life is all about embracing the gray. So do kind of look at that. Some examples of this embracing failure: instead of saying, I'm not good at this, what am I missing? I am awesome at this, I'm on the right track. So it applies at both ends. Both ends of the spectrum, we need to have some amount of humility. I give up. I'll use some of the strategies that we've learned. In everything, we are talking about shifting the thinking from being too buoyant or too negative. I made a mistake. Okay, mistakes may help me learn better, as long as I'm not making the same mistake again and again. Plan A didn't work. Good thing the alphabet has 25 more letters. And if you've created a plan B, plan C, you know that it's going to work. So just start changing the language that we use, because that's where a lot of things will change. I talked about failures are not final. You look at these 6 individuals, all of us have huge respects for these individuals. But if we were to go by some of those labeling that we see, the world had labeled them to be failures. Steve Jobs was a failure. Walt Disney was a failure. So was Albert Einstein or Oprah Winfrey. So if we were to go by that, that failure is final, then these 5 individuals and a group of musicians wouldn't have been what they became. And they are global trendsetters, global leaders in that sense. So nothing is final. These are just some examples of. Now, if that's all about failure, I'll just take a few more minutes to talk about, meaning the growth mindset. How do we kind of get out from there and start changing our thinking from a growth mindset? And, when I was doing this research, I picked this as a definition. Since I'm kind of talking through an educational institute here, we need to bring some amount of research. Somebody, and nobody better than a Stanford professor, who in her book says, mindset is people who believe that their success depends on time and effort. It's a feeling that they have about their skills and intelligence that can be improved with effort and persistence. It's about embracing challenge. It's about persistent through obstacles. It's about learning from criticism. You will get feedback, you will get criticism, but we need to learn from it. Seek our inspirations, can get better, work on one's flaws. All of us have our own problems. All of us have areas where we may not be the best. But the outcomes are sorry, the flaws we need to understand, the process we need to understand, and not the outcomes. And we need to be critical on the flaws, critical on the process. Those two areas, if we focus, the outcomes will automatically change. And last but not the least is that they believe that they can achieve with time and practice. If you didn't do it the first time, doesn't matter. You have to have the belief that I will do it if I give it another shot, maybe a third shot, and patience and learning that come. And that is a growth mindset. And that's the mindset I'm talking about that will take you from a failure to a success. And the benefits, if you talk about this growth mindset, is that it kind of helps you to start thinking, saying an expert was a beginner at some point of time. I focus on progress. These are some statements that the growth mindset makes. Success comes with patience. Everything needs times to learn. I can do hard things. I am capable of anything. There is a concept called positive affirmations. And for those of you who are aware that all you need to do is just tell yourself some positive affirmation statements like the ones you see here, which helps you to move from this negative mindset that you may have to a growth mindset. Now, negative mindset is what I also want to call as a fixed mindset. And when we look at the two mindsets here, it essentially tells us the difference between the two. A fixed mindset avoids challenges, whereas a growth mindset says challenge is an opportunity. And that's what COVID, for example, did for many, many individuals. It just opened a new opportunity. The world has seen so much more because there was a growth mindset operating there. A fixed mindset refuses to receive feedback, whereas a growth mindset is saying the more the better. Give me more feedback because I can become better. I'm going to learn from it and take that things forward. A fixed mindset is trying to prove, and I think this is where a lot of the challenge happens, that I want to prove myself over you. There is a need to prove. Whereas the growth mindset is saying, let's focus on the process, don't worry about the end result. And it's not about you winning or we winning. It's about we winning. There is a threatening which a fixed mindset has, whereas a growth mindset is saying, so if you typically talk to a good quality growth mindset leader, he will typically hire somebody who's even better than them. Now that's a growth mindset at play. Whereas a fixed mindset will want to hire somebody who I can control. So you can't be better than me because then you won't listen to me. But if you look at a good leader, they are going to come back and say, boss, I don't know this. So I want to hire somebody who knows this better than me. And if you know this better than me, come join me. And I am not threatened by you. Just because you know something better than me, you and me will work together. So I think that is where the difference between the two lies. And the last piece here is a fixed mindset feels that talent is static, whereas a growth mindset is saying talent is ever improving. So what I know today is good for today, but tomorrow may be another day. And if some of you have read this book by Marshall Goldsmith called What Brought You Here Can't Take You There. And that's something you need to keep practicing, that, all that you knew so far is good for today, but for tomorrow you need to learn something more. And that continuum that you have of a growth mindset is what will actually help you grow from I won't do it, so I can't do it, I want to do it, to eventually getting to do it, saying I did it. And that continuum, if you keep this affirmation going, if you keep thinking on it that way, is what changes the mindset for you to go and grow in the manner that can transform things. Last, I think it's a question of what do we need to do, in conclusion, to look at going from a learning from failure. Well, failure is going to happen. That's life. Failure is like breathing. You can't say I will stop breathing, and same way you can't stop failing. That's part of life. But the question is, do I accept it? Do I realize that it's okay to get upset. It's okay to, feel that I didn't do something well. It's a question of learning and reflecting on the lessons. It is about owning the mistakes. I made a mistake. I own it, I learn from it, and I reflect on it, and I redefine what I'm going to do better the next time. So, what this failure means to me, and eventually I take action. And it's not procrastinating in my mind. I will learn and say, okay, let me give it a shot again. I won't get scared. And if I do that, it's a question of changing the mindset. The mindset is where all this failure or growth stays. Attitude, behavior, action, results, performance. It's a vicious circle that if I can make sure my mindset is there, the behaviors, the action, the results will all come out of that. And that's all I wanted to share with you. And like Sudhakar mentioned, I run this entity called Upsurge, where we focus on helping people get upsurged in their journeys from failure to success. And I think at this stage, I'll stop sharing. And I hope I've done okay on time, Sudhakar. And
yeah, you are largely on time. Thank you very much, Mr. Viiveck Verma, for this wonderful presentation. Uh, I think the presentation started from your own personal account of what has happened in your life pretty early in life, and how did you grapple with managing that, addressed it very successfully, and you have come out of it. And it's like an entrepreneur who failed a couple of times is good enough to actually mentor others and pick up a few lessons for everyone around. So it is that kind of talk summary that we have seen from you. Thank you so much, sir, for doing this for the benefit of all the participants who have joined from various domains. Some of them are from IT, education, sports, arts, cinema, media, so on and so forth. Some of the academic leaders whom we know have joined, including our own Professor Mahendra Reddy. Good evening, sir, and welcome. You have joined. He's our senior advisor, distinguished advisor at the ICFAI group, and many other leaders I have seen today joining from India and abroad. So for their benefit, your entire presentation has set what is called a framework. It is an anatomy of failure and a taxonomy for success. I think that's the summary I would like to give. And we'll save all the time for the Q&A, and therefore I wholeheartedly request Professor Prasad to start the cluster number 1. Over to you, Professor Prasad.
Thank you, Professor Rao. I think in this series, we are essentially trying to pick the experiences and the brains of those who are gone through a lot, success, failure. And as you rightly put it, I remember having read Bill Gates when he was in Hyderabad the last time he gave an interview, and he said he doesn't recruit anybody senior who has not failed at least once majorly in his life. I think that supports the entire hypothesis that you're talking about. So we begin this with there are members from the audience who would like to understand what is meant by success in this given context, and how are we measuring it in this given context.
So, Mr. Prasad, before I give you an answer to that, I think one of the key questions, like you quoted Mr. Bill Gates, and I say this to a lot of startup founders, to say that when you are working with someone as a mentor, when you are working with someone as a coach, I think one of the important questions to ask is about failure. The mindset we have is we only focus on success. And, whether we are talking to each other, we want to understand where all have you succeeded? What all did you do well in an interview? Everywhere else, we focus so much on success. And I think if all of us can take that one piece to say we will spend a few minutes in every interaction to talk about failures, I think the world will become a very, very different place. And many organizations like Bill Gates that you quoted have resolved to that, saying we want to understand more about your failures, how you dealt with it, what lesson did you learn, how are you going to make sure you don't repeat it, and that's where the future lies. Now, coming to your question in terms of what does success mean? And I think there is no universal answer to what success means, because one, it is relative. Second, it is very circumstantial depending on where I am. And the third is on the evolution curve, where am I? If it's like in the startup world, we say 0 to 1 is one stage, 1 to 100 is another stage, and greater than 100 is another stage. Now, what is a success in the 0 to 1 stage for a startup may not be success when they are in the 1 to 100 stage. So I think, but what is important is for each of us to define what success means for us. And the analogy I use here is that, quite often we run a race. It's important for us when we start running to know whether we are running 100 meters, we are running a 400 meters, we are running a 800 meters, or we are running a marathon. Because then our strategies of running that race will depend on the length we are running. So we will put our energies accordingly and all of that. So now what works for a 100 meters race will not work for an 800-meter race. So my response, rather long one, Mr. Prasad, would be that success is what you define for yourself. So I would say in an individual capacity or in an organizational capacity, it's important to either independently as the founder or you as for yourself, or as a team if you're in an organization, to define what success means and then go after that. The problem with many people is they go after this elusive universal success, and there is no universal success, because I am then aping somebody else. I am a startup and I'm in the automobile business and I'm looking at a home delivery startup and I'm saying they are making 2 crores of top line and I should make the 2 crore, because then when they make 2 crore, it is success. Now it is irrelevant, because in automobile business that 2 crore may mean something else to a food delivery startup. And similarly, as an individual, I come from a background, somebody else comes from a very different background. So what success is to me may not be to them. So you define your success, you define what it means, and yes, validate it with some other external factors, but focus more on internal success factors that are important for you.
I think that's a very important response for the viewers to understand. Many times we look at what's happening around and try to decide or react into what our definition is. And I think you put a very, very important perspective to this. I think personally, there are values which count. Two people who look very similar getting judged, but their values are very different. And therefore, what they're trying to do also is different. And I think you also mentioned examples of the context being very different, outside context being different, industry, initial starting point, so many things. And this, 0 to 1, 1 to 100. So I think there's a huge degree of contextuality to the whole thing. And therefore, the person who's asking this question needs to sit down and reflect and look around and see. I think very, very important point. We have a lot of questions on failure. So I think I'll take the next one as that. I think the audience wanted you to share your views, reasons from your experience about, particularly with respect to startups, as to why most of these failures happen.
So I would think, and I, like I said, I'm an angel investor. I've invested in about 32 startups. I have mentored over 140, 150 startups and worked with many, many more. I think the biggest reason I see, or I would say three things that I notice as the biggest reasons for a lot of startup founders to fail. And again, I say that they failed in this attempt. I'm sure they will go and become better startup founders in their future endeavors. But the reason why their early attempts fail, first one is that they have not understood the problem statement very well. The mindset a lot of times is that I am solution oriented. So I have developed a solution and then I try and find a problem for that. And I think that has to shift. We have to first identify the problem, understand the problem very well, and then build a solution. And if I don't do that, then I have a solution, then I start looking for who has this problem, who can use my solution. And that for a startup is just the wrong way to really look at that, because I don't know who my target audience is, and all of that becomes a big challenge. So I think understanding the problem and staying focused on the problem is one reason why failures can become success. The second, I think, is this whole buzz around valuation versus value creation. This whole last few years of, Everyone who has an idea wants a few $1 million as funding, and everyone's benchmark for measuring success has become how much funding have you got. If you haven't got a few $1 million worth of funding, then you must be useless. It doesn't matter. I think it's a question of value creation rather than valuation. Because if you create value, then over a period of time, wealth creation will happen and hence valuation will happen. But this, quick turnaround in 2 years, I want to get footfalls, I'll have huge burn, but I want to get footfall, I want to get high valuation. And we see enough examples, we see enough examples and more of companies who are kind of doing 1/3 turnover compared to their loss. A 500 crore top line doing 1,500 crore of losses, but the world thinks that they are a fantastic company. And I think that has led to this youngsters thinking that valuation is a very important parameter for success to chase. And I think that's a wrong one. And last but not the least is the ability to take feedback. And I say that a lot of founders fall in love with their ideas so much that they refuse to listen to the feedback that they are getting. And I think that is another massive challenge, that you can't be infatuated and in love with your idea, that, the world is telling you something is not working and your usual response is, no, you haven't understood. And my question to that founder is that if your customer hasn't understood, then the problem lies with you, not with your customer. You haven't done something right. So change your thinking there. And I think those three, I would say, are the top three reasons in my view for a lot of the startups not getting to the point that they are. They can.
I think they are very visible points, very clear-cut big points that the audience and those who will listen in later on can take back. Very, very fundamental points. And I think, all of us appreciate that very valuable feedback. The next query is about, there are a lot of concepts in psychology, from our experience, from the theory, a lot of self-development works which have come up, other concepts also. Now, what made you take Dweck's mindset concept as a central point in your discussion? Is it audible?
Viiveck, are you there? Looks like a technical snag, maybe because of inefficient bandwidth of internet out there. We are on a very important question. I think he'll come back.
Yeah, I'm back here. Yeah.
Yeah, was the question audible?
Not the last part of it.
Okay,
So you
I'll
talked
repeat
about
it.
psychology and all of that. I got that, and the last one or two sentences I think I lost.
Yeah. So from so many concepts that we have from our practice or from the theory, what made you take the mindset concept as being central to or a very critical thing to the way you put it in the center of the circle in one of your last slides? So what made you do that?
I believe, and maybe it's more because I work with people, I am a coach, but I believe that the center of everything actually is mindset. As the cliche goes, mind over matter. I think, a lot of things can change if you just change the way you think. The world is going to operate in the manner it operates. Quite often you can't change too much in the world, but what you can change is the way you receive that and the way you act on it. And I think the power really lies when you take that in your stride. And I call that philosophy of whether you are in control or you are giving away control. When you say it's about mindset, I believe that you have taken charge and you're saying it's about me and it's about how I react and it's about what I can change. It's not about what I can do. Whereas the moment I give that control away, then I'm saying, oh, it's the circumstances, the world doesn't understand. That's how it is, ye to yahan nahi ho sakta hai. This is not possible. India is like this. All of those statements, in my view, come from what I call a state of helplessness because you gave up control. So I believe that mindset is an important thing because that's the only thing I can control. I can control my mind. I can control my actions. I can control my reactions. So the more I can focus on that, the better I can react, the better I can perform. the better I can deliver, and the better life is going to be for me. Satisfaction, joy, all of that I will get because I am now in control of what I'm doing. So that's where my thought of central being mindset comes in. And as a coach, we also believe, and I personally believe, that all of us have the power to do wonderful things. It's just that quite often we haven't discovered. And like Mr. Kalam's statement, I think we are waiting for that failure, which will help us discover that deeper level of success that we are capable of, or that resource that we are already owning, but we didn't realize it as yet.
I think that's an excellent validation of on the mindset concept from the practice point of view. I think one of the most critical points that you mentioned is that at the stage where you receive an impulse, whether it is oral or whether what you see, what you believe in at that stage of reception, thereafter controls the sequence of events and the response that you give. And therefore, it is that internal locus of control, that control that you have inside, which will then dictate whether you move those steps to the outcome, a lot of steps that you have indicated in your presentation.
And even if you go at a psychology and anatomy level, the neurons that you have in your brain, you have the power to change them. And they are changed by this thinking that you have, and if you Google search and do more research on the whole concept of mindset making a difference, because it helps you build new neurons in your brain. And that's how you can, as they say, if you practice something more and more, it becomes a standard practice, because you've developed that neuron in your mind to be able to do that. It's a very powerful tool, in my view, to look at your own mindset.
I'm also coming from a very personal sense, because from the large experiences in life that we've had, and from the research that I was personally doing, I searched a lot of concepts and about what makes people tick. And finally, this is the same concept that I finally ended up choosing with respect to education, that this is the one. If you take one, then this is the concept that you need to take, in which you need to work. So I think it's a very, very practical validation of that. Thank you very much. I think I move to the next question. And you have seen a lot of startup founders, but how do you sense the mindset of a startup founder? How do you capture this in order to start giving your feedback?
So what happens, and I think not just in the case of a startup founder, my own belief, having worked with thousands of people over the last 35 years, is that I think even as human minds, we are capable of, and it may be wrong, but we are capable of reaching a judgment in our mind in matter of 3 to 5 minutes. When we meet another individual, the human mind is capable of making a judgment in 3 to 5 minutes. And I think thereafter, a lot of times the human mind is validating that justification for the next 20-25 minutes. So if I'm having a 30-minute interview, typically in 5 minutes, I made up my mind, and then 25 minutes, I'm validating my mind. If I've decided that you're not good enough for the position, then my questions will come from there to validate my mind, saying, no, you're not the right person. So I think it's a question of us kind of looking at those individuals and seeing the fact that, what are they exhibiting? Is there a kind of confluence of the fact that their words and their behaviors, are they aligned? And I feel that in a lot of pitches or a lot of interactions with startup founders, today they use words because they have become buzzwords. And I think as we go forward, it's going to become even more challenging, because all I have to do is go to ChatGPT and ask a question, and I'll get the most powerful answer. Half of it I may not understand, but I've got the answer. So I know in an interaction, I know the right words to use and I know the right sentences to do, but it doesn't reflect in my behavior. So I think one thing I notice is that. The second, I think, going back to a point I made earlier, how receptive are people to listening? And when I say how receptive to listening, quite often I find people are listening to respond. So I'm asking a question. After the third word in my question, I already see the other person wanting to respond, because now thereafter he's only listening to respond. And the most powerful part of my question may come after the fourth word. But the founder is not even listening to my question. He's now saying, Acha, I know this is what you're asking. I already have an answer. The moment you finish, I'll give you the answer. So I think that ability for them to listen, because that is what they will do with the customer. That is what they will do with the market. When the market is giving feedback, they are going to go and say, I'm going to listen to it because I know the solution already. And the last piece that I think I look at when I'm interacting with people is the fact that how you work with people internally. For example, and this is my personal belief, that I don't invest in any company which is a single founder company. To me, that's a red flag. It's a single founder company, because then, and this is personal, so I'm not saying this is the right philosophy for all investors, but to me, it's an indication of the fact that maybe you have a problem working with people, because a startup will require multiple skills. And for one person to have all the skills will be a problem. Now, either you haven't been able to recognize that it's a problem, or you recognize but you find it difficult to work with people. Could be the two reasons why you're a single founder company. The stakes may vary. I could be 80% owner of the company, and there could be 3 other co-founders who are having 2% and 5%. But at least I know I have somebody who has got a skin in the game. And that to me is a good indication of the fact that you're a people person. You can take people along with you. You value the fact that this person is bringing technology to the table, and I've given him 2%, 5%, or 20%, whatever the equity may be. So I would say these are the few top things that I kind of look at when I'm interacting with people. And to me, so far, by and large, they've proved, and like I said, you have a view and then you look at things to validate it. I think by and large, they have been validated for me largely.
Again, very, very practical insights. I think the point about people walking the talk in the way they communicate, then the listening to respond. I'm reminded of, some of the top founders who sometimes take 2 to 3 minutes to talk, to respond to a very powerful question, very well-known people. So I think it validates the point that, some degree of reflection is needed, because the person sitting on the other side certainly is experienced and is asking questions from a background. Very, very practical points. Thank you very much. There are more questions, but I think, the time is ahead, and I'll hand it back to Professor Rao for second cluster.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Mr. Viiveck, this is going to be a long night. That's what it appears like. So we already finished 7:30, and those of the participants who are still sticking to us are quite serious about this growth mindset. That's a clear test. Well, to all the participants, I want to apologize that we are exceeding the time limit. So I have these two messages to two different entities of people. One very interesting thing that I have seen now is that you have worked with several startups, you have worked with several organizations also, even the experienced founders. Let's dwell a little bit more about these things, because these problems are common. The problems and failures do not recognize the longevity of a founder. So it can happen to anyone. So therefore, it is, in that sense, it is an equal opportunity offender. So has there been anyone in the country who has not had the obsession to succeed? Well, all of us have, most of us have the obsession to succeed. But are there people who are tracking the failures, tracking the people who have failed, and what are they doing with the failure, and where are they landing? Because different people will have different charter, different capacities to land at different destinations. It cannot have a universal success, as you have rightly mentioned. So did you yourself track failures? Did you study those candidates who have failed, or organizations that have failed, or track them? If so, is there anything that you can throw light for us, apart from the theory that we have already discussed?
So I think, it'll be unfair for me to say that I have tracked. I haven't, but I'll give you a 2 or 3, maybe a little bit anecdotal here, that, I think globally, everyone focuses on success. And I think I mentioned that earlier. I run the TEDx Hyderabad platform, largely focuses on people's success. you get invited to various events because you're largely focused on success. And I was very happy a couple of years ago to learn that MIT, Massachusetts, actually runs a platform called Fail Talks. And I was fortunate to be invited to speak at the Fail Talks. And this focuses only on individuals to come and talk about their failure. So I think that is something that hasn't happened too much in India. It does happen very much in the Valley. It happens very much in Israel, and like another example that I can give here is a lot of times people have these parties where failed entrepreneurs are called to come and talk about the failures they have and the learnings they've got out of that. Now, has it become an institutionalized process in India? I don't think so. I think there is a lot more ground to cover. Now, here I would like to kind of straddling the social world and the commercial world. I think the social impact organizations have done a fantastically better job at tracking failure and learning from failures than most commercial organizations, at least in an Indian context, have done. Because largely, this whole concept of success and our glorification of success in terms of top line, bottom line, numbers, and all of that in terms of designation, salaries, all of that has driven so much that we are not really looking at the failures. Whereas you look at an impact organization, I think they are on a daily basis working with individuals. And if you look at the last 2 years, or last 3 years during the whole pandemic period, I think a lot more self-introspection has happened there. To your last point, do I think there are organizations who are focusing on learning and taking that forward? I certainly think I have a lot of respect for the Tata Group, where I think this is given a fair bit of importance. That what is the voice of the customer? Where are we not doing well? And if we are not doing well, I think it is okay as long as we can learn and improve. And it is also okay to acknowledge that, sorry, we did not do this. And it's not just in their hospitality business. While it may be very evident in the Tata Group in their hospitality business, whether it's the Taj hotels or the other chains that they run, but in many of the other businesses, I have seen a lot of senior leaders within the Tata Group who are not afraid of talking about their failure. And I think that reflects on the culture that they have built. And, and many startup founders are now beginning to do that, to say, it's okay, we'll set aside a certain budget, we'll set aside a certain set of resources for you to go and fail. And I think some global organizations are also doing a wonderful job around it. I'm reminded of when I went to the Google office and the Facebook office, for example, they both encourage employees to do something which could be beyond what they do for their office work. And if that fails, it's okay, because you can still learn and take things forward. So I think there's a lot of ground to cover, Sudhakar. And
yeah,
I think beyond Tata Group, I won't know of individuals where this is happening in the startup world.
yes. I particularly like the fact that we need to cover a lot of ground there. There is something much more we need to do. A lot of these mentors who are actually working with either individuals or the organizations have very quickly moved their goalposts to success without actually recalibrating or having new goalposts. The success as an old goalpost has been chased while working for 4 days, and from day 5 onwards, let's have the same thing. Let's give it a try once again. Well, trying once again and all is great, but what individually or collectively works for that particular problem case or a failure case has to be addressed. I think that has not happened because there is no study or tracking. The investment of energy into failure is not that much as the mentor himself is craving for some track record by trying to create some kind of success out of this failed candidate or an organization. I think that's where there is room for all of us. So that's the reason I raised that question. The second thing, Mr. Viiveck, is you have very nicely mentioned that stigmatizing failure or grappling with failure is a cultural thing. Probably in the West, we hear, I see this in newspapers, I see this in stories that my friends from US and other countries talk to me saying that it's an okay thing to fail kind of thing. But I want to juxtapose that with the fact that Indian culture has got a lot of recourse for failures, a lot of recourse for even terminal failures. For example, Indian philosophy says that if you lose someone very dear to you, it says the God has taken away, it is the God's wish. You try and reconcile with that. That's the Indian philosophy. Our grandparents and our parents and elders have put that and fed that into our minds to reconcile. The technology of quick reconciliation lies in Indian philosophy. If that is the case, why is our culture stigmatizing failure still? It is something that we all have to reconcile with. The whole fact that that pointing fingers towards the culture itself is a wrong pointing fingers. That's what I was thinking. Am I wrong?
No, I think you're partly correct. I think the challenge is not so much in the philosophy. I think the challenge is more in the practitioners who are kind of taking that philosophy to people on the ground. You know, you look at, let's say, a young child in school today. You know, the only yardstick we have for measuring the progress of the child is the marks. And that's when we, you know, start building this whole culture of competition. And I use this example very often, saying, you know, today, one of the biggest challenges we face in the corporate world with young employees is the fact that we say they don't know how to work in a team. You know, they are not team players, they are individual contributors. And I'm saying, just let's for a minute go back and reflect on the life of that child for 15 or 18 years. We drilled into the head of the child that you have to become better than the next person that you have. Whether it's at home, you come back to your house and show your report card and say, I came third in the class. You know, the cultural context in India would be, people will ask, who came first, who came second, and what can you do to beat them the next time? You came third this time, very good, but next time you have to come first. And if you came first, then you came first with 94%. Can you come first with 97% next time? So much so that I'm sure you heard the famous story of LSR College in Delhi a couple of years ago saying the admission cutoff was 102%. Now that can only happen, you know, and I went back to saying that, you know, mathematically, at least from my school days, 102 cannot be percent, because percent means out of 100, right? So 102 cannot be out of 100. So the whole concept of, so I think, Sudhakar, my reaction to your statement will be, while at a philosophical level, you're right that, you know, I think if you go back to our scriptures, if you go back to mythology, I think we've not dealt in our mythology, failure is not seen as big as we make it out to be in today's world.
Yes.
But the practitioners over the last many years have created an environment, and I think each of us is to take part of the blame, because, you know, in schools, in colleges, at homes, in societies, everywhere, this judgment business has become so heavy that we are judging people all the time and you know, kind of labeling people based on our judgment, and that becoming so strong is, I think, where the problem lies. And I think we need to go back to your point. We need to go back to the original philosophies which tell us that it's okay to fail.
Yeah. I think we need to go back and amplify the lessons that are lying in our epics and our mythological texts, and probably enliven it and celebrate it in a bigger way than what we have done. Probably what the practitioners in the West have shown a path for the current generation. We need to take recourse to the secret power that is lying within our own mythological text. That's a very, very interesting. And I also agree with you that all of us will have to be blamed. Organizations, leaders, institutions, parents, all of us will. I can give two examples. One is that I know a school founder who is the be all and end all of the school. He's the reviewer, he is the trainer, he is the He is the choreographer. He is the chief guest for the annual festival, and he only decides the awards, who has danced well, and he goes on stage to hand over the award, and he's only there in everything. So yeah, what kind of examples are we setting for the generation? And I think one of my friends from Mumbai today has written on LinkedIn is that we train these kids to color within the lines. You know, there are images and all, and we encourage adults to think outside the box. What a huge gap that it has. And I think, yes, as practice, we have failed. We need to first admit that, and let us look at what the other steps that we can actually take. Yes, as founders, as leaders, as parents, I think as institutions also, we have a lot of homework to do before we step out to blame the young startup founders who have all the reason to fail. I think all the justifiable reasons to fail, either because of lack of experience or because of the gush of adrenaline. It could be any of these reasons. And if adults like us have those two factors, we also fail. And we have many more reasons to fail. And according to me, when adults fail, it is inexcusable. But failure is inevitable, as we have all seen. How do we grapple with failure was the essence of the entire talk. Thank you so much, sir, for that. These are debatable. Yeah.
So 2 points, Sudhakar, to your response. I think one is the fact that, it's all about, again, the thinking, So for example, if we look at children at homes, if they come and talk about problems, usually the first reaction for people is, oh, don't talk to me about problems. And I'm saying that in the startup world, that's the most critical piece. A good quality founder is someone who's able to spot problems, who's able to research problems. But that is a muscle we don't build in the younger generation today. We tell them, no, tell me a solution, tell me a solution, and tell me a solution. And I think we need to do a little more in terms of the problem there. And the last piece, in terms of the experience, and I'll very quickly share that these judgments that we make such a big difference. A couple of months ago on Children's Day, we went to a community and I led an activity where we went to some Safai Mitra community, what the world calls rag pickers. And we collected about 100 children. These children were all Safai Mitra's children. And, language I focus a lot on. So I don't call them rag pickers, they are Safai Mitra, because the irony is we create the kachra, but they get labeled as rag pickers, kachre wala, waste pickers, all of that. But anyway, these children, 120 children, we gave them art material and we asked them to spend 2 hours to draw, paint their future. And a lot of us who were doing this activity, despite our best efforts, still had judgments of what these children will be able to draw and paint. And shockingly, these children, 10-year-old, 12-year-old child, drawing a house which has solar panels, which has wind mills powering the house. These are images that these children drew. And our mind, in our mindset, we are saying, ye Safai Mitra ke bacche ko kya wo roti kapda makan ke aage kahan sochega. They don't have the ability to think. And I think a lot of times it's our judgments, which make a big difference. So I think, like you rightly said, and I agree, each one of us is to blame. We have to do those small incremental steps to change the mindset.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. I think you mentioned that our own judgments and prejudiced mindsets as adults also have created some kind of pitfalls for the youngsters to, while on one hand, there's nothing to learn much, but it has actually helped them learn in the wrong direction as well. I think very consciously or unconsciously, we have led them on the wrong path. Yes, a lot of homework we need to do on that. I'll quickly allow Dr. Lakshman to raise his question. Dr. Lakshman, please go ahead.
Thank you so much, sir. Sir, I have a quick question.
Sure.
So why the Indian people who studied in United States would not show interest on the to work with the people in India? That means, let's say, for example, a software engineer who studied in US, who started working in US, let's say after 5 years of experience, they would not show interest to work with the TCS consultancy software engineer or Capgemini software engineer. I'm not talking about everybody, most of the percentage, sir. So why they are not showing the interest? When This is my question, sir.
Sure. So I think there are, in my view, there will be two probable reasons for that, because again, the answer may vary for each individual. But I think by and large, there will be two. One is the fact that I think the mindset, if I have spent 5 years working for an organization in, let's say, the Silicon Valley area or in the US, I think the mindset of all individuals, if you visit any office in the US, and I have had the opportunity to do that many times, the work culture there is so different because it's largely focused on the performance. It's not focused on these judgments. It's not basis of a lot of what we talked about, the prejudices and all of that. So I think then they find it difficult because the mindset of this individual who hasn't had the exposure to the US compared to somebody who's had a 5-year or a 10-year exposure to working in some organization in the US, the mindset itself is so difficult that it becomes a little difficult for them to adjust to each other. And that could be one reason why there is some friction that happens. And as a result, I want to avoid the friction. I don't work. The second, if it is gone beyond an individual level, and if it's more at a team level or at an organization level, it is also to do with the ecosystem. I think if you look at the progressed markets, and North America could certainly be a more progressed market, Israel could be another progressed markets, and some markets in Europe, if you look at a Finland, for example, or Sweden, for example, now these are places where thought process at team and organization level has evolved to saying, how do we take the entire team forward? Whereas a lot of times in the Indian context, we are still struggling with this school number one topper in class syndrome. So I'm still not working with the whole team. I may be a team player, but at the end of the day, when the performance appraisal time comes, I still want to be the number one ranked. So if it means I have to show somebody down, I'll show somebody down because that's the only way I can go up. So that could also be another reason where when teams are working, that there will be some amount of friction that could happen between people who've spent more time there and here. And last but not the least is the technology evolution. I think the third one, the gap is getting bridged very rapidly now, but still there is a gap that, the technologies, and I don't mean technology just by saying the technology that you're using to build your products. For simple things like the coffee that you get in your office, maybe a far more evolved model if you're working in a office in California compared to getting that coffee if you're working in some office in India. You will get it at 10:30 and you will get it at 4 o'clock. Whereas I may be working in an office in North America, I am not bothered about when I need coffee. I have the best coffee lying there and I can go. So technologies that deep rooted into their living or in their homes. So I think those could be 2 or 3 reasons, Dr. Lakshman, I feel there could be some friction between individuals who are working in evolved markets compared to India. And I think it's changing. We'll hopefully get there sooner rather than later. But I hope that answers your question.
Thanks for the excellent answer, sir.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, sir. There's another question quickly. I want to take it up. That is, do you believe, one of the members, Mandeep Kumar Sharma has asked, do you believe that it's the job of entrepreneurs to build the mindset of their team, or if they should hire and fire fast?
So I think the two is not either or, Mandeep. I think it is the job of an entrepreneur to evangelize. And it is to evangelize not just to the team, but also to their customers. So it is the job of the entrepreneur to really build the positivity, build the, the evangelism around the product or around the service. And the second point, is it their job to hire and fire fast? Yes, you have to evolve to make sure that you are hiring right, because the cost of a wrong hire is very, very high. And if you do make that mistake, then it is equally important to cut cultural fitment issue with a new team member you've taken on board, and there are some core values or core principles that you have which don't align with that individual. I think carrying that for too long is a problem. So answer to your question, is it the entrepreneur's responsibility? Absolutely, it is the entrepreneur's responsibility to build that culture because it all starts from the top. If I don't see my founder following what he's or the other people in the organization are preaching, then it's not going to work. So it is the entrepreneur's responsibility. If I'm talking about frugality in the organization and I come to office in a fancy car, and I take fancy holidays at company expenses, I travel business class, I take fancy air conditioned, luxury cars and travel around the city. Now the employee in the organization is going to say, boss, don't talk to me about frugality when the founder is whiling away company money on his trips. So it does start and end with the entrepreneur. And yes, we have to get better at hiring. But if we do realize we've made a mistake, I think it's okay to admit that we made a mistake and let the employee go after we've done the due kind of finding out that, is it organization's mistake? Is it the support we've not provided? But after doing all of that due diligence, it's still not working, then I think it makes sense to cut the cord and say, it's okay, maybe you'll succeed somewhere else, but doesn't seem to be working with us.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Thank you very much, sir. That is, there is an interesting question again from one of the members, one of the participants, and I'll raise that question, and that is, can you please suggest ways to grow as organizational savvy? Whatever the participant meant, what is the general belief on being organizational savvy, and what are the suggestions that you can give him or her to grow as being organizationally savvy?
So I would think that, we call it in the coaching parlance, we call it as executive presence. Now, if you want to become successful in any organization, I think you need to improve your executive presence. What that means is that you need to understand the organization better. What are the touch points that the organization recognizes as success? What is it that the organization feels are the right things for things to move forward in the organization? And these can vary. There is no universal answer that every organization will have. So you need to first of all understand that, that what is it that drives the organization. Some are very people-driven organizations, some are very number-driven organizations, some are very ecosystem-driven organizations. Some are very internal focused organizations, some are very society focused organizations. So what is it that your organization is looking at? The second is to understand your presence. What is the organization and the leaders and your peers perceiving you to be? And it's important for you to do that dipstick in those coffee conversations or in formal conversations. So informal and formal both get a sense of what the organization is perceiving you to be. And when I say organization, it means people, because there is no entity called, there is no person called organization. Organization is a cluster of people. So some of people who are below you, who are peers, who are above you, get a feedback. And the third is that then try and see that where are the gaps. The organization is focusing on a certain set of parameters or values. You are perceived in a certain manner. And if there are gaps, then start working towards bridging that gap, or recognize that these gaps are unsurmountable because these are going against the ethos of what you stand for. And it's okay. Sometimes that will happen because you are a very internal focused individual who wants to say, I will do self-criticism, I will improve. And you are in an organization which says, forget all this, don't waste time on this, let's just go and do something in the market without doing too much thinking, without doing much introspection, then you're going to have a discomfort on a daily basis. So I would think that this executive presence you need to change for yourself. And this could mean the way you dress, the way you talk, the things that you focus on. All of these will come out of this analysis that you are able to do, that how well do you match the organizational requirements and needs. So I would think if you can do that, then the suaveness, what is the term you use, Sudhakar?
Savvy.
Yeah, the organization savviness for you will become better. You will start becoming more of a hero within the organization to say, boss, this guy everyone loves. this employee because, that employee is talking the employee language, is, walking the company culture, and is following everything and is performing, because the success factors of the organization you've understood, and you're then delivering to those success factors.
Great. Great. Fantastic. I think that's extremely useful. There are many practical suggestions that have come out of this discussion, especially of understanding what the organization perceives and working out a solution that is specific to that organization in terms of trying to be organizationally savvy or create that executive presence. Thank you. Thank you, sir. There are several questions, but I'm reducing everything to one because most of it looks like have been touched upon. But in case there are any questions that are to be asked by the participants, you can raise your hand, but I will ask my question now. Sir, I'm sure you will agree with me that there are many texts, many lectures, many books, self-help books, which talk about don't do this, but do that. Don't be this and be that. Don't be afraid, but be brave. These are all intangible statements at one level. And on the other level, we need to have something which people can follow. There are oversupply of intangible statements on one side and an undersupply of how people can actually get down to work on these things. There are very, very few people. It is not that they don't want to work on it, but there seems to be a missing link between the desirable stuff, the things to do stuff, vis-a-vis the things one ought to have done by actually executing or by practicing. So what I'm essentially saying is that how do we convert and transform these intangible statements into practices based on belief for benefit of self or organization?
So let me start by saying that, there is something called as positive toxicity.
Sorry?
And positive toxicity.
Okay.
So too much of positiveness is also a toxic behavior. You creating an artificial world where you say that, I can wear the Superman underwear, as I like to call it, and do everything and anything and everything is possible to be done, meaning it isn't going to be possible, so we have to be able to recognize that too much of, and today a lot of these practitioners come and, pardon my saying so, being a coach myself, you will hear a lot of the coaches who will come and tell you, you talk to me and I'll make sure you can do anything. You can fly, you can swim, you can jump, you can do anything that you can think of. Now, at a philosophical level, it's okay to say that. And it's good to say where you are today, you can perform significantly better than where you are today. But to say that you can be the best in anything and everything you touch, it's like saying anything you touch turns to gold. That's not going to happen. So I think it's important for us as individuals also to do a self-assessment to say that if someone is telling us that, this is what my capability is, this is what I can do, I think it's equally important for us to do a self-assessment and say that, is that really possible? And even if I do believe that it is possible and I start the journey towards that, in a matter of a few weeks or a few months, I will know whether that journey is something which is worth pursuing or not. Like I said earlier, we start getting signals, our body will start giving us signals that this is working or this is not working. So it's important to recognize, acknowledge that and realize, okay, I cannot, get from 0 to 100 in a matter of 2 months. So if I get to 50 or 60, I think it's a significant improvement. And again, it goes back to what is your definition of success? Somebody else may be defining that success for you, but it's important for you to acknowledge, listen to that, and then internalize that and either agree with that or say, okay, no, you are saying 100 is the success. I think if I get to 70, that is success enough for me. And even if I have to chase that 70 to 100, I will chase that as phase 2. Right now, I will define my success to be 70. Let me get to 70 first. Let me see the experience of getting to 70. Let me experience 70. And then see that if I still have some undesired goals to achieve and I still have some more journey to take, then that 70 can go to 100. because then that 70 is not 70 anymore. When I sit back to look at it, that 70 is 0. Because I'm saying I'm now at this level, I operate at this level. Now I need to go from here to the next level. So this is my starting point. So what looked like 70 yesterday is going to start looking like 0 to me when I'm performing at 70. To say, ye to main roj karta hu bas. Now I need to do something more. That may take me to 120, but don't look at it all at once. Set unrealistic goals, expectations, because then the fear of failure will come in. Because if you set out to do 100 all at once and you achieved 65 or you achieved 72, you're going to tell yourself you're a failure. But if you set out to do 60 in the first lot and you did 65, you're going to pat your back and say, I did well, and then I will take the journey from 65 to 100.
Awesome. I think I feel like listening to you over and over again and continue this conversation because it is so good. Not because it is nice to chat just for the sake of chatting, but it is extremely useful and extremely distilled for the benefit of those who can actually apply it for their own workplace or for their own life, for their own career. I think they can easily apply. That's why it's extremely interesting. And we should continue this. You have mentioned several points, sir, to take home. I think I'll do a quick summary, but before that, I want to check with Professor Prasad if he would like to butt in with any question, or shall I go ahead and wrap it up?
I think the fundamentals of what need to be done have been explained. And I think some of these other questions are slightly, all these things put together is what will make that. And if you don't do this, there's no way you're going to get there.
Right. Right. Thank you so much for that. I think from 6:30 p.m. onwards, it's now beyond 8. We have dealt with this thing for more than 1.5 hours. Reasonably a long session, a blockbuster one at that. There have been many participants who joined on Zoom as well as on Facebook. I felt very, very happy when more and more people join and they try to make those comments and raise those questions and see a validation in what they thought was right, what they believed was right, and what has been said by the leader is a kind of evidence to their own beliefs or their own practices. So it was fantastic that so many people are joining. It is the power of a growth mindset at one side that is inviting everyone to come and participate. And it is also the power of the speaker to attract more participants. So I want to congratulate both the topic as well as the leader who has chosen that topic. Thank you so much, sir, for this amazing 1.5 hour sessions. And let me just do a quick summary, because we are all in this teaching learning process, and it is important for the benefit of all the participants and those who would like to join subsequently also to have this quick summary. Many takeaways, as I mentioned, but I'll identify a few. Sir, this talk started very well with your own journey, mentioning 1 or 2 incidents of your own journey and your personal date with failure. You have talked about your journey at KV Pune and the load of expectation on you being son of a great father. It could be true to most cases, not just being son of a great father, but it could be true to more cases also in terms of the burden of the parents bearing on them too much. I think how one has overcome that, one has created a path for oneself, was the opening thing for you. And then you went on to dissect and bisect failure. That's what I said. It is an anatomy of failure that you looked at in a carefully distilled manner, in a detailed manner that has been explained to us. Thank you so much for doing that. So the summary of that is that either you are succeeding or you are learning. There is no failure in one way. That is an amazing summary of what you. The cultural context is the next important takeaway. Success is celebrated. Failure is not even discussed. Failure is hushed up under the carpet. Failure it starts with the institutions, and I say that, and most of us have studied from some of the premier institutions, and they have not done a good job. The highest salary packages have been advertised. The media has lapped it up. They talked as if all the 100 students, when I say 100% students, have got that kind of salaries. and therefore the expectations have been lopsided on the students, both from the institution and both from the society, of course, parents as well. And therefore the students, youngsters have been under tremendous pressure to perform, whereas the reality is you don't get that 1 crore salaries or whatever kind of salaries that they advertise. Not many. So we try to normalize one of the rarest peaks of success and try to celebrate only that. And we have never even looked at or talked about the failures, or kind of we kind of stigmatize the failures as well. Therefore, institutions and individuals have failed. However, the paradox of Indian philosophy, having several opportunities and avenues for recourse, on one hand, has not translated that into our own practices. All seniors, all advisors, all elderly gentlemen themselves have not practiced grappling with failure in a fair manner. So that is fantastic, and we have liked the way you have busted the busted the myths of these failures. I think it has reminded me when you said that failure is a fantastic scar to carry, like an army officer who battled. There's an amazing thing you mentioned. It is a badge to carry. I think we should bring it to that level. One of the startups that I mentored, I have requested them to hold an event which is titled as Unheard Stories or Failure Stories. The whole theme of a startup company in a public event is the failure stories, and everyone who's coming there will have to talk about failures only and only failures. I mean, to my surprise, they agreed, and I talked about failures of mine, the companies of my friends, the companies that are known to us, including the company or the startup which is hosting that event. I took their permission to talk about failures. In fact, I have invited them to share 3 failures, documented 3 failures. Then I put it on the slide, and it is for the benefit of driving all the co-workers in that startup. We have done this to say that, see, the failures of this organization X are 1, 2, 3, and they're all stunned. And I'm sure it has had beneficial effect on all the members, and most of the team members stuck to that organization for a longer time, because I presented the failure stories of many other organizations, at least half a dozen organizations that were presented. So a very nice point. I really like this. Fantastic. It's a fantastic scar to carry, like an army officer who battled. That's a beautiful point. Fail early and fail fast. Failure is almost certain. Or let me remove almost. Failure is certain. So fail early and fail fast. I think here also you have looked at failure in a great manner, and you have fleshed out success for us in that manner in your analysis and examples and anecdotes. So what next to failure? While failing is certainty, what next? That useful tips also have been very nicely shared. And more importantly, or more dangerously, what we have to take note of is the signs of fear of failure. Being watchful of the signs of fear of failure are very, very useful for us, like avoidance, like not talking about it. All those things, I think, is a very, very important discussion that you have talked about in your study, in your presentation. And no shame policy was something which stood out very, very fresh in my mind. And embracing failure is important. The give up versus humility. I think several takeaways are there, but a series of takeaways you have given. Now, while we have many people who have succeeded after failing, the stories of famous personalities like Steve Jobs and all at one end serves as a motivation for us. I think there's a greater need that is required to sit with the failed individual or the organization and help them overcome or recalibrate. As you said, don't look at the 100 kilometers race at one go. Look at 50 or look at 20. The achievable goals, the recalibrated goalpost, whatever you call it. I think that's a very important and practical and doable kind of step that you have suggested. That's a fantastic thing. And intangible statements of self-help will have to move into convertible practices based on belief. And there are tips that you have given. The negative mindset or the fixed mindset versus growth mindset. This is available in every book, but what is not available on Google and in any book is to build a practical framework, and it calls for leadership. Again, everywhere it's a test of leadership. I think for a startup founder as well as an experienced founder, for any leader in any organization or an entrepreneur, it's a test of leadership, how to come up with the framework to overcome and move forward. While there is no universal success, we need to understand why people fail. And one of the important things that you mentioned, especially in the case of startups, is that even experienced organizations fail. That's a different story altogether. But especially in startups, the valuation game versus the value creation. I think that's a fantastic way to look at it. And we also need to do a lot of homework in tracking several failure cases and try and bring out more meat for our discussion and learnings. I think that's very, very important. Our obsession with our own thinking, not being able to listen, some of these things have actually put individuals at loss, especially those who have started early in their game in terms of entrepreneurship. They haven't, even the edtech companies have many times mentioned that these traditional universities do not understand edtech because they are traditional and they don't understand the education part or technology part of it. Whereas the fact, and I keep saying this again and again, and I have invited several debates in public places. One of the startup founders and edtech player, he has said that technology is extremely important. While we all agree that technology is extremely important, the discussion and debate begins from technology and ends with technology, while blaming the very important stakeholder called faculty or the teacher, who is not kept as a centerpiece when architecting that particular technology. Time and again, we see this happening. And therefore, they end up in what you said. They say that you have not understood my solution. You have not understood my solution because you are not even part of my architecture. I have not kept you out of the architecture, but you are not understood because you are very traditional and you are outdated. I think that kind of customer centricity they have, and therefore many edtechs have failed of late. We have seen after the effervescence artificially brought up by COVID, we have seen many edtech organizations taking a beating. So the debate continues. On one hand, if you have the internal locus of control, and that's a very, very positive thing according to me, but then still there is the debate of if you have everything to be controlled and if you don't try to cite any reasons, there can be negativity, and it is debatable in terms of too much of pressure on one's own activities. On the other hand, never give up is also going to cause some stress. We teach everyone to never give up. Are there no reasons to give up? We never talk about this in public. I think Steve Jobs kind of person should go to Stanford and say, give up. Then we all will believe. Or stay foolish, then we all will stay foolish, though that is misunderstood in a way. But staying hungry was understood very well. Well, coming back to our own point of summary is that it is debatable or never give up kind of stressor. Too much internal locus of control could go the other way. I think the stress and the wrong ways that it is possible to lead us is something that we need to discuss and consider at least. So we have also discussed about not just the startup founders, but everyone kind of fail, provided that the framework for failure is more or less same, irrespective of what is the source of failure. I think I have been successful, or I have been in existence for 20 years, so I will run this organization for the next 20 years. So that kind of thing generally is what it is. Because at a certain level of experience, one can grow the ability to obfuscate the results and make it look like success, which the startup founders cannot. So therefore, in both these cases, it is extremely important to test one's leadership and be intellectually honest. And here I am reminded of our own founder, late Sri N.J. Yashasvi, a great leader himself and a great academic this country has produced. In one of the meetings with us a decade back, he mentioned that a decade is not exactly 10 years, so don't get me wrong on that. Long back, N.J. Yashasvi mentioned that if anything goes wrong, a true leader does three things. One is acknowledge that something has gone wrong. Immediately acknowledge and be the first one to acknowledge that something has gone wrong. so that we don't go round and round about defending, trying to push away that something is actually wrong. So that's the important thing. Second is, he suggested that quickly own up that it has gone wrong because of your not being alert to certain things, why it has gone wrong or where it has gone wrong. Admit and also own up that it has gone wrong because of you, so that we don't end up blaming others. We don't look for any blame game or opportunities of blaming it on others. And the third one is, take a day and come back and work on solving it. Now that you have owned it up, now that you have admitted, it is the responsibility squarely on you. As you rightly mentioned, the entrepreneurs will have to evangelize growth mindset. And this is the way leaders evangelize growth mindset. I admit, I own up, and I quickly come back with a solution, and I discuss with everyone and partake their solutions, their suggestions into the solution making. And then that's to it. That's what I'm reminded of at this juncture. Amazing discussions, several activities and anecdotes that you have mentioned in your own experience dealing with children, especially how insensitive we are in using certain terminologies for a certain set of people. Yes, kids are kids. I think the art exercise that you have done with 120 children is an amazing lesson for all of us. My mind was stuck up only at the nomenclature. Of course, the 120 children came up with beautiful piece of art beyond one's expectations is a great thing to celebrate. But my mind was still stuck up at the nomenclature, how insensitive we are. And beautiful questions have come and solutions, suggestions that you have made in terms of organizational savvy, that is how to create one's executive presence, which is very, very specific to organization. Do dipstick, very beautiful practical suggestion you have given. Do dipstick in about what the organization perceives in your small meetings, informal discussions and all, and then work accordingly the solution for it. Being over positive or what is called positive toxicity is just not good. Just like a Superman's underwear being worn outside, that kind of solutions will not come. Or something like, I can make elephants fly kind of a positivity is not one. I think one has to make an assessment on one's own body signals, so to say, the signals that come from within, and have practical goals, achievable goals, and then work towards succeeding. I think the summary is either you succeed or you learn. When you learn, you will come back to succeed. That's an amazing way this whole session has gone about. Thank you so much, sir. We will go back and write a summary of this session. We request you to share the PPT with us. You can email it to me, and that will help us write it. These summaries are written by another senior prof, Professor Ved Purishwar, Dr. Ved Purishwar, and we publish these summaries on our archives. And we also publish these summaries into a book. We have come up with one compilation. The second one is almost under print now. It should be ready very soon. And 3-4 also in the pipeline, many more books. I think about 35 such conversations we compile into one book. Okay. We are at 94. One book is already out, 2 are in pipeline, 1 is under print. With help from very good individuals like leaders like you, we are able to conduct these conversations and learn ourselves first, and then be able to share these learnings with like-minded individuals who are joining every week with us on Fridays, 6:30 p.m.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sudhakar. And once again, great heartfelt thanks to you and to Professor Prasad for inviting me. And I'm so glad if people could take away from the session today, if there's only one message that I would say at the end of it is celebrate failure. Failure is the best thing that can happen to you. So celebrate it, learn from it, and go ahead. The more we fail, the more we succeed. So wish you all the best.
Thank you, sir.
To all the audience, and thank you, Sudhakar, and thank you, Professor Prasad. Wonderful talking to both of you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, my friends, we will see you again at on Friday at 6:30 p.m. next. Stay tuned, come back, and till then, try and understand what Carol Dweck has said and what Mr. Viiveck Verma has said is extremely practicable. It's extremely doable kind of lessons that we have today. Go back and reflect and be very, very practical about it. Thank you so much. See you next Friday at 6:30 p.m. Good night.
Thank you.